Hey everyone, welcome to Group Text. My guest today has not only seen the other side of fundamentalist Jewish orthodoxy, but has thrived in her new beginnings amongst found family in front of the cameras on 2 seasons of the Netflix reality series, My Unorthodox Life. In 2013, Julia Haart left her cloistered, ultra-Orthodox, so many words to say, community of Monsey, New York, where men make the rules and women follow them blindly. With nothing but her hopes, a love of fashion, and an unbeatable work ethic, Julia and her family extracted themselves from a life that she felt was no longer sustainable. Then she became the CEO of World Elite Marketing, the largest modeling conglomerate in the world, a fashion designer, a brand manager, a designer, an author, and who was remarried to an Italian man who, spoiler alert, is not Jewish. Julia has a new line of shapewear called Plus Body that caters to women of all shapes and sizes. Say hello to Julia Haart. Welcome to Group Text.
Thank you so much for having me on, Melissa. That was a very beautiful introduction. I love that. Thank you.
You're welcome. So I want to talk to you about Plus Body and My Unorthodox Life, but I feel like my listeners may need a foundation of what you went through. So tell us a little bit about the world you left behind.
I grew up in a world where you are defined by your biology, meaning if you're born a woman, all women are supposed to do the exact same thing. They're supposed to be wives and mothers. They're supposed to be not seen and not heard, right? The concept that ruled my life was what is called tznius, which is modesty. And that doesn't just apply to the fact that I was covered head to toe most of my life. It's funny because I get this all the time. People are like, wow, your skin's amazing. How'd you do it? I'm like, well, live in a fundamentalist community where you're covered head to toe for the first 43 years, your skin's amazing. Because I never got sunlight, right? From my collarbone all the way down to my ankles, I was covered my whole life, and then my hair as well. So I grew up in a world where, there's a concept, Nashun Daitan Kalos, which means a woman's mind is light. She's incapable of grasping deep and esoteric subjects. Therefore, I had a bookshelf of books I wasn't allowed to read. I got in trouble all the time because so the Gemara, which is the Talmud, which is where we get a lot of the way that we live our life, is written in Aramaic. Men are taught Aramaic, women are not. Women are not actually allowed to study the Gemara. It's a big, big no-no. And so, of course, I taught myself Aramaic and studied the Gemara. So I grew up in a world where women have no autonomy, no self-determination. I didn't know until my 30s that you could live alone as a woman in this country. I thought it was illegal because I didn't know anyone. In my world, you go from your father's house to your husband's house till you die. So I think the easiest way to explain it is take Bridgerton, subtract the fabulous parties and dresses, and you get a general idea of how I live my life.
That's a great descriptor. So did your parents maybe have a clue when you were growing up, especially like in your teen years and your early 20s, that maybe you did want to read the books on the shelf?
No, really none. Until my early 30s, when I started my journey, because it took me 8 years, almost 9, to plan my escape, I was the biggest goody-goody. I wanted to be good. I wanted to do what God wanted me, what I was told God wants from me, which is, Julia, don't talk, don't argue, don't read, don't educate yourself. Master and commander, just do what you're told, like everybody else. Why do you have to be so out there? And by out there, I don't mean the way I dress, because I was covered head to toe. Out there meaning I argued with men. No, disaster. So my entire life, until my early 30s, I thought something was intrinsically wrong with me. I thought I was somehow flawed, that I wasn't okay with this. I kept it all to myself. So no one had any idea. Don't forget, I taught Limudei Kodesh. I taught Judaic subjects in high school for 20 years. I was their Judaics teacher, right? So the first, I would say, until my 30s, I was all in. I was miserable. I hated it, but I thought that's because something was wrong with me. And I just tried to become more. I have diaries, probably 30 of them, because every day from the time I was 19 years old, from the day I got married until I would say a month before I left, I would write my sins of the day in a book before I went to sleep, so that on Yom Kippur, when we had to repent for our sins, I would have a list to read from. I was like the world's biggest goody goody. And then my 30s, thanks to my daughter, I realized that it's not me, it's the laws. And so I started to plan my escape and educate myself and read literature and watch television and try to figure out what the world outside looked like, because I was literally living in an 18th century existence. And that's the easiest, most simplest way to explain it. I am a time traveler. I time traveled from the 1800s to the 21st century at 42 years of age.
I mean, that takes serious courage. How was your daughter the catalyst for you to start to step in and go, wait a minute? Because obviously, somehow some of this was getting through to her that there was more.
And that's the beautiful thing. No, she was so little. I think she was 6 years old or 5. She was a child. She didn't even read yet. I mean, she read,
right.
You know what I'm talking. You know exactly what you're reading at 5, right?
Yeah.
She was just a born rebel. She was born, like I give you a perfect example. When she was in first grade, so around that same age, the assignment was, if you could walk in someone's shoes, whose shoes would you walk in? And Miriam, and it was a PTA conference, so you got to go in and you got to see everybody's answers, right? So there's a class of around 40 kids, 40 girls, obviously girls and boys study separately. So we walk in and the whole wall is plastered with these things. And everyone is saying, I'll be like my great saintly grandmother who had 14 children. I'll be like my saintly mother who had 11 children. I'll be like this one who had 9 children. It was all about being saintly and having a bunch of children. Everybody. And then Miriam. It was just amazing. Miriam's was like, well, I would never want to walk in my father's shoes because they're too big. My mother's shoes are too high. And honestly, I think everyone should learn to walk in their own shoes. Why would you want to wear somebody else's shoes? And her whole thing was like, be yourself.
Right.
At five, right? So around that time period, she came to my husband and she said that she wants to play soccer. Now, Miriam is a girl who has won Spartan race twice, not just for her age group, but for all women. She's incredibly athletic. She could hang in the craziest positions. I'm just like in total awe. And she wanted to play soccer. And my husband told her no. And when she asked him why, and we're talking about 5, 6, 7-year-old child here, just keep that in mind.
Right.
She was told that because you're not allowed to wear pants, right? Because in my world, you don't wear pants. So because you're not allowed to wear pants, if you're playing soccer in a skirt, a man may walk by the field and see as you kick your knee and have inappropriate thoughts about you, and that's your fault. Now, let's not talk about what kind of man gets turned on by a 6-year-old's knees. Let's just leave that for a minute.
Yeah, that's a different podcast.
Another day. Yes,
and
exactly.
Usually involves a documentary and true crime. Just leaving it there.
Exactly. However, my little child looks at my husband and says, okay, I understand. So if I'm responsible for his sins, is he responsible for mine? And that was it. Hearing these words coming out of a 6-year-old child, I'd never spoken them. I'd never said them out loud. I was literally teaching Torah studies all day, right?
Right.
She heard that from no one. It was just pure logic. It made no sense. And hearing it from the mouth of a child, they had convinced me that I was somehow intrinsically flawed.
Right.
No one could convince me that my 6-year-old was. And that was the day. I mean, I remember my brain, like, you know, you have those things in cartoons where the head comes off and things.
Oh, yeah.
My brain actually exploded. Like, I'm sitting here looking at my child and she says something and it was so simple and so rational and practical and realistic. And that's all I needed. I needed permission to acknowledge that it wasn't me, it was the laws. And the minute I did that, everything changed.
From the mouths of babes, as they say.
No joke. No joke.
When you decided to leave, did you expect your kids wanting to go with you?
I wasn't living without them.
Did you need to convince them?
Here's the beauty of it. So I knew that most women who leave my community, and there's a very high propensity of suicide, by the way. I have uh, probably 14 people I know who committed suicide, who left the community, because you really are a time traveler. You are not equipped to handle the modern world. You know nothing, nothing about the outside. But for me, I think what I realized is if I try to proselytize, convince, explain, I'm going to get nowhere.
Right.
So what I did instead was I invited them to travel with me. That's what I did. I took them to Paris. I took them to Greece. I took them on my journey, and they got to see the outside world. And I didn't have to convince them of anything because they themselves looked at the outside world and said, wow. You know, I can't remember which one of my kids said it, but one of my kids was like, we went from a world of no to a world of yes. And that's all I did. I just showed them the outside world. And they understood how much they'd been missing, how much beauty and culture and fascination there is from meeting people who are from different ethnicities, different forms of life, and that you don't need to be a religious, fundamentalist, Orthodox Jew for God to love you.
The one child that you really did not leave behind isn't the wrong word.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Who's still religious.
Yeah. How did you do that? I mean, I couldn't imagine having to make that kind of a decision no matter how right you knew it was.
It wasn't a decision. It was, so it's funny because my daughter is the beginning of my Exodus story, but she's also the end of my Exodus story. Because after I read all this stuff and did all these planning and worked for 9 years and built up money through selling insurance and all of this stuff, I was too scared to leave. I was too afraid to go. I didn't know anyone. I don't think anyone realizes what that's like, not knowing a single human being in a world that you really don't recognize. It's terrifying.
Oh, it's got to be terrifying. I mean, I would be paralyzed with fear.
I was terrified. And the idea of being not just a zero, but not having any support system, not like, think of all the people who know you, your people went to school with, your college things, your first job, all of this stuff. I didn't have any of that. I was walking into Mars, literally. I didn't know how anything worked. I'd never been to a bar. I'd never been to a club. I'd never been on a date. I didn't know anything. And I just got too scared. And I decided that it's too hard. It's not possible to leave. And so I decided to commit suicide. Oof. And I spent a good 6 months trying to figure out, how do I kill myself in a way, you ready for this one? In a way that no one in community will realize I actually committed suicide, because otherwise my children wouldn't get shidduchim, wouldn't get good matches. And just like in the 1800s in Bridgerton, all that matters is the match, right? You don't get a good match, forget your life. So I was worried that my killing myself would harm my children's chances at marriage. So I came up with an idea that I was going to starve myself to death, because then people would think I had an eating disorder, and eating disorders are not such a big deal. Oh, that's great, because if her mother had an eating disorder and she's so skinny after child 13, she'll still look good. That's like basically, yeah. So I literally started starving myself to death. I ate one piece of bread and a tomato for a good 9 months, and got down to a weight that I don't want to say out loud publicly because it's so freaking scary. And I was probably 3-4 pounds away from hospitalization, like the end of my life. And then Miriam comes home, say Miriam, and she was hysterically crying. And we're not criers in my family. We're tough fighting cookies. We don't, we fight. And I'd never seen her. She was bawling, like genuinely bawling. And I asked her what was wrong. And she got an F on a test on a paper that she handed in because the teacher said it was too good to be written by a girl. So she must have cheated.
Oh, Jesus.
And my little genius daughter, who, by the way, at 13 was the first time she ever saw a computer ever in her life, had ever heard of one, saw one, touched one at 13. At 18, she was teaching a class in augmented reality in Stanford University. She's the youngest person in Stanford history to ever give a class. So to be failed for being excellent,
it's insane.
It killed her. And she was so devastated. That's when I packed my shit and walked out the door, excuse my language, because I realized at that very moment that killing myself was super selfish because I would solve my pain. But what about my children? So when I left, if I hadn't left then, I would have been dead. He would have no mother at all. It was death or leave.
How soon after did they follow you?
Everyone at their own pace. So Miriam was like, where do I sign up? Let's go. So she was the first who came with me. And then Batsheva and Shlomo in their own time. And then Aaron, as you know, we still do this roundabout, in, out situation. But like I spoke to him today, we have a great relationship. And, you know, I'm a stubborn bitch. It'll come.
I think about people having to leave these kinds of very closed communities. And when they leave, they really don't know anything. I mean, you had your hair covered since a very young age. Did you go like, holy shit, I didn't realize, like, oh, fuck, how much hair color costs?
Well, I had no hair.
Oh, you were that.
I had no hair. I have pictures. They're pretty terrifying. I wasn't bald. I wasn't shaved. My hair had been covered. You know how like when guys wear baseball caps,
Yep.
they get a bald spot where their baseball cap is. So imagine wearing a very tight fitted baseball cap around your entire head for 23 years.
Not good for the hairline.
Not good for the hairline. I had no hair. When I first left the community, first of all, I was too scared to take off my wig. So like the first time I experimented, I had my wig on, if you can imagine such a thing. I was literally petrified to take it off because it was such a big no-no in my world that it felt more naked than being naked, which makes no sense. But when I finally took it off, I ended up having to put on extensions.
Well, I was going to say, thank God for extensions.
Thank God for extensions. I had massive bald spots all over my head because it had seen no vitamin D. I had these deep metal things that are on a wig to hold it in place because, you know, so wherever the metal was, and it's here and here in the front and the sides and the back, the hair was gone, completely gone. And then in most of the other places, it was like baseball hat, you know, hadn't seen sunlight or gotten air in 20-something years. So it was a freaking disaster. And so I wore extensions for 11 years. And slowly my hair started growing back. And then I was sitting on my desk in November, December, at the end of last year, and I was going on a date. And I look at my hair and I realized that the extensions are kind of, you know, falling down, meaning I need to do the new extensions. And then I look up, I was like, wait, but that's from here down, but up here looks really full. And then I realized, oh my God, I don't need extensions anymore. And I sat at my desk with the nail scissors and cut them off. And this is fantastic. All my hair. For the first time in my life, at 53 years old, I get to wear my own hair without any additions outside. And it feels fabulous.
Well, it's so interesting because, and I'm going to get into this, you've been so successful and you actually just lit up just talking about your hair. So you go into the working world. How did you end up at Elite World Group?
So I met my husband when I was creative director of La Perla.
Okay, wait. Okay, we got to way rewind. What was your first job? How did you get into the lingerie business, which would be something that would be completely taboo, and then becoming a CEO? I mean, this is like an incredible journey.
Well, I do have a really high IQ. But anyway.
I never would have thought. I didn't see the thing about La Perla. And for people who don't know, that is one of the most expensive lingerie brands in the world.
Well, it's really beautiful and it felt really nice. And it's in Italian, unfortunately, but there was an article that came out in a big Italian paper. I think it was Corriere della Sera or something to that effect. And basically it was saying that the only time that La Perla made money from the time it was sold at XYZ was when I was creative director. And that was the only moment of like, wow, because when I came on board, I changed everything. I brought the meeting age of people coming into La Perla into their 30s from their 50s. I put, I think we were making around 12.5 million of sales a month. And I think as I left, it went down to 4. And now, as you know, they've just been taken over by the court. They're about to go bankrupt.
Yeah. But wait, let's go back.
But how did I get there?
How did you get there? Because, and also, it's one thing to get into the fashion world, but from where you come from to get into the lingerie world cannot have been a straight line.
My book is called Brazen, From Long Sleeves to Lingerie.
Love
for that exact reason, because it is genuinely comical that a woman who was covered up her entire life becomes creative director of a lingerie brand. It is, God's sense of humor, no doubt. I had a shoe company that was incredibly successful. We were being sold all over the world within a year. I launched it in January of 2013. And by February of 2014, we were, I think, by April, I can't remember. Somewhere between 2014 and 2015, we were in like 100 and something points of sale. I mean, it went massive. I was in Gallery Lafayette and Farfetch and this one and that one and the other. And then what ended up happening is we did a co-branding between my brand of shoes and La Perla, because La Perla was trying to transform itself into a full fashion brand. I was the 5th creative director in 5 years.
Ooh.
Yeah. 5th creative director in 5 years. And I invented a bunch of stuff when I was there. I made the first ever stretch levers lace. Levers lace is made on a levers loom. It's very old. There's only a few of them left. They're in Calais, France. And I came to them. I'm like, hi, I'm Julia Haart. Never heard of me. You don't know me from I have a hole in the wall. I have an idea. I want to use stretch threads to make lace so that underwear is not uncomfortable. Anyone who's ever tried on a thong knows what it feels like if it has no stretch. Now you're accustomed to stretch. Before I came along, it didn't exist. We called it the Freedom Panty. I think it sold out in like 3 weeks or something to that effect. It was crazy. And then it was, Julia, can you design this? And Julia, can you design that? And can you design this? And then I ended up being creative director. So that's how it happened. My stuff sells. That's how.
How did you get the seed? How did you convince someone to give you seed money to start your first company, to start the shoe company?
Well, I'll tell you a story about Tommy Hilfiger that may answer your question.
Okay.
So when I first came out of the community, I wanted to start a shoe brand, except I knew nothing about production. I'd never heard of distribution, marketing, merchandising. I didn't know what PR was. Like, I literally was an 18th century human.
Right.
Okay. So I find out that there's this thing called Art Basel. I just Google a lot. I found out this thing called Art Basel, and there's a lot of fashion people there. So I fly to Miami, and I have to sneak into a party. So I managed to sneak myself into a fashion event, and I hear someone talking, and they say, oh, it's Tommy Hilfiger. I was like, oh my God, it's Tommy Hilfiger. And I carried with me, I was still not like super texting phone. I was more notebook and pen, right? Took me time to get used to all this stuff. Not that I didn't have a cell phone in my community, of course I did. But a lot of phones in my community, my son has a kosher phone, which doesn't have internet internet access. It has no texting, no WhatsApp. It's just a phone, like a dialing phone. It's called a kosher phone. But okay, regardless. So I take out my notebook and my pen, and I walk over to Tommy Hilfiger. And at this point, I'm still fully covered. I'm still kosher. It was a process, right? The first thing was just leaving. So, and this is December, and I left in November. So I'm still fully attired, the whole 9 yards. I think I started wearing pants a little bit after. And I walk over to Tommy Hilfiger. I'm like, hi, I'm Julia Haart. Can you explain to me about blah, 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 blah? And he spent 45 minutes with me.
He's a really nice guy.
He's a lovely person. Lovely, lovely person. Sitting in this party, giving me names of production, distribution, marketing, literally giving me so much help. I can't even begin to tell you how invaluable that conversation was. Okay, fast forward to 2021. Tommy Hilfiger reaches out to me because he heard about all the innovations I've been doing at EWG. I created the first ever avatars, like the hyper-realistic avatars and all that stuff. I was doing that way before Meta became Meta, and no one knew what I was doing, and they thought I was all crazy. And I kept on saying, guys, I'm telling you, this is the future. So we made the first ever for like modeling and all that stuff. We made the first ever hyper-realistic avatars. We did a huge campaign for Steve Madden.
Oh, I remember those.
That was me. And it was the first time, not me, I'm sorry, EWG with me. And that was the first time in history, and you can look it up, that in a third quarter's earning report, a CEO of a company attributed the highest record sales in their company's history and the most visits to their website to my campaign. Because I basically changed the way that we advertise. I made it quantifiable and trackable. You could see where every media dollar was going. And I used data to figure out who was going to advertise the shoes. And then we used this virtual world and the avatars I created, and we made bobbleheads, and it was just epically amazing. So anyway, so Tommy Hilfiger comes and he's like, I want to be partners with you. I think what you're doing is genius and I love it. And I'd love to partner with you on it. And I burst out laughing. And I'm like, Tommy, you don't know who I am. He had no idea.
Of course
like,
not.
You don't remember me. Of course not, because you could imagine how different I look.
But also how many people he talks to between, even just at a party.
Of course. And again, I looked so different. I didn't have my wig on anymore. I mean, you wouldn't have recognized me, right?
Right.
I tell him, I don't know if you remember, and I remind him of the event. And I said to him, and I've always wanted to know, what made you sit down with me at a party and give me all that information? And he said, Julia, he remembered immediately. He's like, oh my God, you're that crazy lady that looked like a nun, literally, but in the nicest way.
Yeah.
And then he says, Julia, you looked so determined and so on fire. I literally was scared to say no to you. And I think that's what it was. I was so determined. You could tell in my body that I wasn't going to fail, because to me, the stakes were failure or having to go back, and I would never go back.
Right.
So it was failure, it was success or death, right? Those were the stakes for me. And I think that the idea that I had was a really good one. Before I came around, you don't hear the word comfort. And in fact, when I came into the industry and I said, the fact that we're still, lauding and praising this whole nonsense of suffering for beauty is outrageous. I realized that fashion was made for women, but not for women. Nobody cared what we felt like. No one cared if we were comfortable. All they cared about was what we looked like. And that was my whole pitch. I created shoes that were high heels, but that were also ergonomically designed so that the pressure points were evenly distributed across the entire bed of your foot, thereby alleviating the pressure of having your whole body stand on the ball of your foot, which is why high heel shoes are so painful. To the point that my shoes, before I sold them, were about to go into the Four Seasons in Hong Kong, into their spa, because they were so ergonomically designed, they were actually not bad for you.
Wow.
So people loved the concept. They understood my vision. They loved what I had invented, and they believed in me. And they saw that I wasn't going to let it fail. I was going to succeed.
Do you think, coming from such a repressed community where men are completely in charge, has given you, in sort of a backwards way, a leg up in business? Because because you're used to dealing with men who think they're God, other CEOs.
Melissa, I wish I could say that. That would make me feel so good about myself, but it's not true. And I'm not going to lie. My being used to men being right and having all the power stayed with me.
Really?
And it is, yes, because it's indoctrination from the time I was a 10-year-old child. My whole purpose in life was to please men. That was my purpose. I was built in that world to please a man. That was my only purpose in life. Raise his children, make his life easy, do whatever he says, and keep my mouth shut. That was my purpose. And as much as in business, I didn't give a shit, right? I just went for it. I didn't care, man, women. I was just this machine of work. All I did was work 20 hours a day. I mean, I wasn't going to let anyone fail. When it came to personal relationships, I still had that embedded inside of me. This idea that a man is always right. I'm supposed to be pleasing. So I'm still working on it. But at least now I recognize that I'm not there yet. I'm not. I'm still working against 30 years of conditioning that men are superior and that my role is to please them. I'm still working on it.
I say, which is going to be really interesting because unfortunately you are getting divorced and you found out about it through the tabloids.
No, that didn't actually happen.
Oh,
I
because
asked
that's
for
what it
divorce.
says.
I know. But in reality, I asked for divorce April 2020, and we had a whole plan of how we were getting divorced. So no, I actually asked for divorce 9 months into my marriage.
Oh, well,
Yeah,
we
it's a part of
all
everything you need to know.
make mistakes based on all sorts of things. Let's just leave it
And
at
also,
that.
don't forget, I was 2 years old, 3 years old when I met him, right?
Right.
Nothing about, I was such a naive child, like so many things that, and I'll be honest, like my kids saw it and I thought they were crazy.
I hate to be intrusive, but this just popped into my mind. How terrifying was it to the first time you had sex with someone who wasn't your husband?
It wasn't terrifying. It was fabulous. Are you kidding me? It was a 21-year-old Cirque du Soleil acrobat. It was fantastic. I wasn't scared at all. I was so excited. I was like, oh. Because, sex in my world is you say Tehillim and you're supposed to think of holy thoughts and all this stuff. And, a man's not allowed to take care of you down there and certain, you can't. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. So there's no oral anything going on and they're not allowed.
Well, you're not allowed to have fun. You're simply there to perform a duty.
Basically, yes. That's even a nice way of saying it, but sure, let's stick with that. And then when I started educating myself and reading all these books and watching these shows, and they make lovemaking look, I was like, that is not what's happening in my bedroom. I don't know what's good. That is not it. So when I first came out, I was still wearing my wig. I was literally still too afraid to wear my wig, but I was like, let's have sex.
Right.
So, so the first person I had sex with was a 21-year-old or 22, 23, somewhere early 20s, Cirque du Soleil acrobat.
Well, you certainly set your bar high.
Oh, honey, I was like, oh, that's why people like sex. Okay, let's do that again.
Let's talk about your shapewear line, Plus Body.
Basically, my success has always been in taking what is and turning it upside down and making it what it wasn't. So, for example, in lingerie, I made stretch levers lace. I put bras into clothing. I made the first ever hybrid of clothing that's not just sold by your dress size, but by your cup size. So many actresses wore it. It was really, really beautiful. So everything I've done with the shoes, making them comfortable, it's always about technology and fashion melded together. So I watched this movie a lot later than most people did, Bridget Jones's Diary.
Mm-hmm.
And there's that scene in there where she has to decide whether she's going to wear the shapewear so she can look better in her dress so she could get Hugh Grant, but then she can't bring him home because no one wants to get caught dead in shapewear. Okay. So I realized everything I do is always about women, right? It's always about women, whether it was making comfortable shoes or comfortable underwear or shifting the power dynamic in the modeling and talent management industry, putting the power in their hands by making them into brands and networks and building them into avatars and giving them longevity and control. Everything I've always done, it's always about innovation for women. That's my thing. That's all I care about. No, that's not all I care about, but it's something I care about deeply. So let me explain to you what I did. I realized, okay, I need to make shapewear that's so beautiful that you never have to choose between wearing shapewear and feeling bad about yourself. And I don't want women to ever feel bad about themselves. And it's a lose-lose. No matter what we do, someone's going to make us feel guilty. If you don't wear shapewear, like, oh, you're not taking care of your body. If you do wear shapewear, oh, you're too materialistic, right? You can't win. If you take care of your skin, you're shallow. If you don't take care of yourself. It's right. A lose-lose for women all around. But I decided, let's make it a win-win. For the women who want to wear shapewear, let's not make it embarrassing, where they ever have to feel that if someone sees them in shapewear, they feel humiliated or ashamed. I hate that idea. Plus, most brands don't have large size ranges. And I understand why. It's very expensive to produce in a production a massive range of sizes. But again, if I'm going to help women, it has to be all women.
Right.
We have the largest range of sizes, I think, still today, I think. So what did I do? I realized, why is shapewear so ugly? Beige, white, and black always. Not because it's what doesn't show up under clothing, because think of all the red, purple, pink lingerie you have, right? It's that way because when you take color and you dye it and you stretch it, this is what happens. So I use these pair of pants as an example. They're Saint Laurent, great company, beautiful fit. and they're just so discernibly colorful and patterned.
Right.
This is what happens when you stretch. You see those white lines?
Yeah, that's not good.
That's not good. And that's why you ever walk down the street and you see someone wearing something that's a bit too small in there, you get those same white lines. Dyed clothing is not meant to be stretched past a certain point. The color fades, the pattern. So we had to change the way we color our clothing. And we incorporated a heat fusion inside that. So basically, just going to give you the old and the new. This was my first collection. This is my shapewear. Does this look like any shapewear you've ever seen in your life? No. Now watch this. Discernible pattern, discernible colors. Now watch. Oh, wait, I can even get my son in here because it's more fun than two people stretching.
It totally doesn't change.
It doesn't budge. You can literally stretch it from one end of the room to the other. It doesn't budge. And my new collection, look at this red.
It's a great red.
Look
and red's very in.
And but wait, look at this. You can literally stretch it. It just doesn't budge. It doesn't budge. And this one, the new collection, which this is a sample.
Everyone loves a good sample.
The new collection, the bra is built inside completely. And it gives you optionality whether you want the cup or you don't. You don't need to wear a bra with this. We've tested them on double Fs and it holds them in place.
Wow.
Because think about it. The compression pushes everything up. Mm-hmm. And because this is a bra and it's in your size, it's not going to give you pancake boob, which is like the ugliest thing of all time.
Or uniboob.
So you actually have bra cups. So you're lifted and the compression holds you there. So you put on this bodysuit, you don't need a bra. It's incredibly breathable. You can wear it out. You can wear it in. It's shapewear, except it doesn't look like any shapewear on the planet.
So it's really turning shapewear into lingerie.
It's turning shapewear into clothing, into something you can wear outdoors. I mean, this iteration, my second season, because we got so many requests for this, I have tank tops. I have bodysuits, like actual regular clothing that happens to be shapewear.
Right. And you still, though, have shapewear in your line.
I do. I have regular shapewear as well, except it's patterned and colorful.
Right. Which, again, you're turning it into not something that can be an everyday thing. It's also, if you don't want to be embarrassed taking off your clothes and being in all those icky colors, you now have pretty...
Like imagine you're wearing this as real regular shapewear, not as clothing. Uh-huh. Someone undresses you and sees this.
It's hot.
Or someone undresses you and sees this beauty. I mean, there's no world in which you're going to feel uncomfortable. No one will ever know it's shapewear. And then, of course, I'm very excited. I can announce it here, although I think just don't, let's hope nobody yells at me later. But we are introducing for this, hopefully the end of the year, like just in time for resort, the first swimwear shapewear.
Wow.
Because think about it. I can color anything. And it's patterned and colored. And it feels like swimwear. It looks like swimwear. It dries like swimwear, except it sucks you in every direction, pops up your boobs, gives you a boob job, gives you a belly, a tummy tuck and lipo, pops up your butt, and it looks like a bathing suit.
Oh my God, I want to do business with you. Where is all this? Where is the shapewear available?
So our first season we just launched in online, but this second season we are in over 22 points of sale. I don't know if I'm allowed to say them yet. I'm scared to say something.
So coming to it, most importantly, first of all,
but they're going to be in stores all over America. We've got some amazing, very exciting partners that are going to be carrying it. I'm going to be doing events in a bunch of different department stores. So everybody listen up to those announcements. And we're really excited about it because they're comfortable, they're beautiful, they make you feel good about yourself, and you never have to be embarrassed when you take off your clothes.
Okay, Julia Haart, you are remarkable.
Thank you, Melissa.
Like,
That's
I
so
want to
cool.
do business with you. Anyway,
We should. I have an idea, actually.
Perfect.
This is what I do. I don't sleep. I have
Let me get the plug out for you.
ideas.
Plus Body Shapewear, Body by Julia Haart with 2As.com. Your story. I can't wait for the limited series and Natalie Portman playing you. I'm just going to leave it at that. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa. Really, I appreciate you so much.